Welcome everybody. It's Rev. We are going to do a slightly different video than what you might be used to on this channel. I know when I do my discussion videos, which a lot of viewers do seem to like, I kind of just pull up DB, have some cards in the deck builder and just talk, but I kind of wanted to organize my thoughts a little bit more and just see how it goes because a lot of feedback that I've received is that it can be somewhat unstructured and it's kind of hard to follow the narrative if there's not something visually to kind of organize the thoughts as well. So I'm going to try this and just go over a topic which I've more or less been talking about for the last several months, which is hybrid Blackwing versus pure Blackwing, and just kind of want to be outright and say what is on my mind and kind of what I think the future of Blackwings is. Um, and the burning question that a lot of people, ask me, and I've answered several times on the channel, is hybrid, or do you think hybrid at least, is better than pure Blackwings? And I will just cut to the chase. Yes, I do. It's I've had plenty of differing opinions on many different topics about Goat and Edison, some of which I've expressed that I'm very confident in, some of which that I have expressed I'm not confident at all in. And some things that I just said I'll stay out of my lane. Like even when I was talking about like Forgs and Giga, I was like, I don't have enough reps with these decks to frankly have an important or an informed opinion on this type of thing. So I think there is something to being intellectually honest and just like staying in your lane. Like I'm not going to listen to a Frog player about Blackwing opinions. You want to listen to players that have a lot of reps and experience with the deck about their Blackwing deck, where they see Blackwing lining up in the meta. And I do think hybrid Blackwings is better than pure Blackwings. And in terms of a confidence interval, I'm very confident in that, and I'm going to explain why and what the considerations and trade-offs are with pure Blackwings versus hybrid Blackwings. Now, one thing that I think is going to get a lot of people in trouble, which is something we're going to talk about later in the video, is how close some deck building changes are would basically make this deck worse than Blackwings. It's a very thin line between you just running a worse Blackwing deck if you don't build it properly. I think the recipe which I have here um, is honestly only a few cards off from just being outright worse than pure Blackwings, and it's not that it's necessarily comparable to Vayu, but if we're talking about hybrid, it's a hybrid between Vayu and Blackwings, but it would be outright worse than Vayu as well. Um, so I think that's kind of an interesting thing, which is I've tinkered with this deck in all the different combinations and ratios under the sun more than anybody. I guarantee I've tested this more than anybody. And this deck is very close to being worse than pure Blackwings. I do think the deck on the screen is better than pure Blackwings. I'm extremely confident of that. And I'm going to tell you a few reasons why. Um, Now, in one of my previous videos, which was titled, discussing hybrid, I did go over what deck building choices will make this deck worse than Blackwings and why. I'm just going to do a very quick recap of that, and I don't think this deck is, at this point, a 100% final finished product. I think there are very marginal and slight um, options for deck building and player expression, but I think they're significantly less than pure Blackwings. Um, and I think it's a lot more akin to Vayu Turbo, which is it's kind of already been figured out, Vayu Turbo. And if you deviate too much, you're just making your deck worse. I feel very similarly that this deck is extremely tight, and if you do make some deviations um, from a few of the cards I'll outline here, your deck just gets worse. You might as well just run pure Blackwings where you have more deck building flexibility. So uh, if you want to hear the reasonings on why some of these cards are uncuttable or not flex, it's in a previous video, but I'll just go through this very quickly because this deck on the screen is going to be the baseline for a lot of the assumptions and stuff we're going to be talking about. So, uh, flex in terms of the monster lineup, there are two flex spots. It is the second Blizzard and the second Bora. In your spell lineup, there are 0 flex spots. You can never cut any of these cards. In your trap lineup, there are a few flex spots as well. So oppression, the second oppression, or I guess the first oppression, could find its way into the side depending on how you construct the build. And one dim priz could be cut, or I suppose, moved to the side. So you basically have 4 flex spots in this deck. And trust me, any deviation you make from these 4 flex spots will unequivocally make your deck worse. It's not like an arrogance thing, like me saying that. I've just tested enough, and I've tested more than anybody to know that if you change any of the 4 cards, anything other than the 4 cards I just outlined, your deck will be worse. So recap: in the main deck, Blizz, the second one, the second Bora, Oppression, and Dimpriz. In the side, um, Ryko is a flex, Fissure's a flex, Mindcon's a flex, and personally, I guess, I previously said maybe one Rug could be a flex, maybe one Dust could be a flex, but I honestly don't think so. So realistically, you do have the Ryko, the Fissure, and the Mindcon. I have been back and forth on DD Warrior Lady and like Nobleman's versus the Minecon Reiko package. Frankly, I think like Reiko is just like a higher individual card quality card, but the searchability with Rhoda for DD Warrior Lady and the fact that it kind of just fits into the Blackwing game plan of being a beatdown deck, kind of, and like just a beatdown card that can just poke and get in damage, I think does fit a little bit more. But this isn't a deck list discussion. This is broadly more about hybrid versus pure. So the first topic we're going to discuss when comparing these two decks is opening hand quality. So first, on the left of the screen, all of these slides are going to be laid out the exact same way. So something that's going to come up over and over again here is card variety and optionality. So Hybrid Blackwings has significantly more card variety in your opening hand than pure Blackwings. Your opening hands are going to be significantly less normal summon reliant than pure Blackwings. You have several 1-card starters, um, namely like Rhoda into Arma, and you have several 2-card starters, which could be, you know, something like uh, a Rhoda plus a Vayu, or a Greffer plus a um, what's it called, Necro in hand, or just like Rhoda plus Soroka, whatever it might be. There are just several 2-card starters that Blackwings doesn't otherwise have. Um, honestly, outside of something like a Whirlwind plus like Bird Search, pure Blackwings doesn't really have any starters. Um, so, or it doesn't have like really any starters, honestly, and it assuredly has less starters than hybrid. Um, the other thing I want to talk about is more redundancies. So when you look at an opening hand with something like hybrid versus Blackwings, and I highly would recommend, if you really want to take the deck seriously, do 50 to 100 opening hands with each deck, and just like do a score, like what's your opening hand quality score, and I guarantee you, money back guarantee that the hybrid Blackwing hand will have a higher opening hand quality score than the pure Blackwing if you're running my list. Um, just because you have less redundancy. So that redundancy could be Vayu no conversion. That could be 2 Blizzards or 2 Boras. These are cards that in their own right are very good and powerful pieces of your engine, but don't necessarily make each other better. Um, so, I think like a common thing that like comes up is, having duplicates of certain cards can be very good. So like a very obvious example of this would be having multiple Reckless Greeds. Um, is of course better than just having one Reckless Greed. It has what's called self synergy. Having 2 Boras, not it doesn't have synergy with itself. Having 2 Shuras even, as much as that's like a core component of the deck, that typically is going to give you a lot less flexibility on how you start your first few opening turns than something like maybe like a Shura plus an Arma, or even like a Shura plus a Bora. So card variety, optionality, and less redundancies are significantly more prevalent in the hybrid list than something like a pure Blackwing list. Um, one less Blizzard even kind of here, which is the last point, definitely does make a difference. So there are plenty of opening Blackwing hands where you have maybe 2 Blizzards and a Vayu, which frankly just aren't that good. If you replace one of those Blizzards with a Rhoda or an Arma, or even the grepher in a great scenario, you're in action, and things come together a lot more cleanly. And even if you do open a hand that's something like blizz blizz, and you top deck a rota or something like that, and you have no grave set up, that Arma being able to send a level 4 bird to turn on your blizzards just makes your opening hand quality and the path of what your hand is going to shape up in the game plan a lot better. And the last thing is really just you have no turn one ignition or trigger effects in Blackwing. I know somebody's going to say, "Oh, well, guess what? Soroko's an ignition effect or something like that." But like realistically, like you just don't have any like actual like Stratos like trigger effects, and you don't have anything like Grepher, which is an incredible ignition effect. So the summary here, and I don't think this is necessarily really a contentious point, is that the opening hand quality for hybrid Blackwing, if you test 50 hands of each, um, is going to be very, very obviously better for hybrid. So that's the first point. Consistency. So something that I've talked about in the past is how certain decks will play entirely from hand. Certain decks will play. Uh-oh, I missed an Oxford comma, ladies and gentlemen. Play from hand and field. Well, we'll circle back to that in a second. But something that I've talked about is how certain decks will play from grave, certain decks will play from hand, and certain decks will play from field. Now, pure Blackwings generally does play from both hand and field. Hand typically being something like Kalut, and occasionally does have the ability to play strictly from grave with just like a pure Vayu synchro. Um, so like Sirocco plus Vayu is something that plays from grave. Another example of something that plays entirely from grave, well, I won't say entirely, but very commonly from grave is Vayu Turbo, something that plays uh, very heavily from hand would be something like Hero Frogs. Um, so you can kind of see the difference. I would say pure Blackwings is significantly more reliant on playing strictly from hand and field with the occasional ability to play from grave. Um, Whereas hybrid Blackwings has the ability to play from hand, grave, and field very easily. Um, why this is important is certain types of setups that you do, I call them insurance setups, are the ability to maybe make a push main one, and if it gets swept, you have the ability to recur something from grave, like a Vayu Synchro, or a burial follow up, or something like that. Um, and another kind of thing is like an insurance play is, let's say you want to make a big push. You can commit something like a Vayu Synchro if you know you have the ability to send another Vayu from grave or from deck to grave as your follow-up or defense from another turn. You might even be able to back it up from a Kalut, which is playing, or back it up with a Kalut, which is playing from hand. Um, so that's the point. I think hybrid has the ability to play from all three, hand, field, and grave, significantly more than pure Blackwings, which typically plays from hand and field. In terms of consistency, hybrid, if you just kind of look at the deck list, has several additional search effects as well as targeted send effects, which definitely helps consistency. Having the ability to rota into either a Necro, Arma, or Grepher is extremely important. Um, and having the ability to choose what to send with an Arma or a Grepher is also extremely important. There are going to be plenty of times where you pitch something from hand with a Grepher that seems like a good card, like you might pitch a Shura or something, or even a Kalut, maybe even maybe even a Gale, and send something, and it actually turns out to be the correct play. In addition, the more options that you have to make a choice, the higher the skill expression. So this last point, which says higher flexibility equals more skill expression equals higher skill transfer, is something that I've talked about for a while, which is um, honestly something that I think Patrick Hoban talked about originally, which is the decks that give you the widest range of plays typically allow you to express yourself in terms of skill as a player significantly more than linear decks. Um, and higher skill transfer basically means the skill differential between you and your opponent is going to basically be wider in a deck that allows you to express yourself. So I think a great example of this is Lightsworn. Lightsworn in general is a very, very linear deck. If you've gotten more than 20 games in with the deck, the vast, vast majority of turns there is going to be one very obvious play that you need to make, and occasionally a different play that you can make, but it's bad. With something like Blackwings, I think it's a deck like pure Blackwings. I think that has a lot of gameplay flexibility, and there are typically a handful of plays that you can make on any given turn. And choosing the right one is what's going to allow you to differentiate yourself as a player. I think that's extended even further with hybrid. So because you have higher card variety, you have more utilities, and you have the ability to targeted send and search. Your range of plays and setups, even if they're multi-turn setups, is significantly higher in hybrid Blackwing than pure Blackwing. So I think that's a good thing for good players. So I would say consistency-wise, hybrid wins out, no doubt. So opening hand quality, no doubt in my mind on this first slide that hybrid is better. Consistency, no doubt in my mind that hybrid is better. Because even something like burial, like people get like really hung up on burial. They say, oh, I have to, I didn't go +3 off of it, I didn't go +2 off of it. But like sometimes you just like burial back a Kalut and then you blizzard and that like wins you the game. Like even like stuff that like seems super neg um, will win you games. I mean, I actually just won locals today, and like burial, I didn't use it for a plus, but my opponent activated 2 gold sarks, and then like that allowed me to win the game. Like I just burialed it back to their grave. They didn't resolve. Like sometimes they're gonna activate a return, and you just burial the stuff back to the grave. Like sometimes they are, telegraphing a dad, and you just fuck up their grave with burial. Like people do get hung up on like going super plussy off that card, but the flexibility of a card like that, I just don't think can be stated enough. All right, next point. So synergies. I do think of any deck really in the entire format, I would say that Blackwings, because it is like kind of one of the earliest engines of Yu-Gi-Oh, probably has the most synergies like within its engine than almost any other deck that I can think of. So I've used this term in the past, which is like a surface area of synergies. So like when you think of even a card like let's actually just say Kalut, but like because Kalut has like tons of synergies. It synergizes with, of course, every single Blackwing card. It allows you to set up Grave for like Shura plays, which then allows you to set up stuff with like a Vayu and a Sirocco. It allows you to maintain board presence. It synergizes with Whirlwind. When you contrast that surface area of synergies, which means basically it has um, synergies with multiple cards in your deck with something like Gemspark in Hero Beat. Gemspark is a fantastic card, but it has a one-dimensional synergy, which is that Gemspark has synergy with Alias, and then it's useless. That's the only synergy it has. So I think Blackwings out of any deck, and it's probably why they're so good, has the highest surface area of synergies than anything else in the format, pretty much. Um, Hybrid, I think, has an even higher surface area of synergies because you play less redundancies and you have higher utility due to targeted search and send. So I think something that just doesn't necessarily show up in like the deck building screen is what your surface areas of synergies are and basically how wide that surface area is. And I think hybrid undoubtedly has a much wider surface area of synergies than pure Blackwings, which is a great thing. Now, here's one trade-off, which I do think um, goes to pure Blackwing's favor. So next is deck building flexibility. I think undoubtedly, um, once you get a few reps in with each of these decks, you're going to very quickly realize, and just start with my build, I'll just say it frankly, just start with my build. You're going to realize that you have very, very little deck building flexibility with this before your deck just gets worse than pure Blackwings. It's a very thin line. If you start tweaking things before your deck just kind of becomes bad and you say, why am I not just playing pure Blackwings? Um, in addition, because you're running 2 engines, and I'm not even sure I'd say like the Rhoda Greffer stuff is like even an engine. It's more of like an engine supplement. But um, if you deviate, things don't line up properly and they just become clunkier. I would also say, on this last point here on the left, if hybrid does become more popular, um, your opponents are probably going to know your entire deck, like 37 plus cards of your deck, just because I don't think if you know what you're doing, you can play something much different than the deck that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. With Pure Black Wings, moving on to the right over here, you have significantly higher deck building flexibility, whether or not it's something like, draw traps, sliding in a Gores, maybe you play an upstart build, something like that. Um, and as much as Black Wings are kind of a defined deck, I do think, even if it's a small degree, I think you have a little bit higher of a surprise factor with Pure Black Wings. If the hybrid list becomes more and more popular. I do think right now there is an edge to hybrid just because I don't think that many people are paying attention, and I think they're kind of stuck in their ways. But I think the surprise factor, if the deck does become more popular, would probably go to Pure Black Wings. Because you could switch up your build between tournaments, or even in War League, you could switch it up from week to week. If you start running hybrid Black Wings, you can't really switch anything. There are a few flex spots, but if you deviate, you're just running a worse deck. Next up, we're going to talk about ceiling. So I think, without a doubt, hybrid Black Wings has a significantly higher ceiling than pure Black Wings. Your dad access is better. You get to fix your grave in many other ways. You get to run Burial, which is also a very high versatility, high floor card, which means it's never really that bad, but is also an extremely high ceiling card. In addition, the two best post side cards in the format, Deck Dev and Oppression, are better in hybrid Black Wings. So you're going to be able to more readily pop off early deck devs. You're going to be able to set up your deck devs better. You can play under your own oppression better. So I don't. There's what's not to love. In addition, just the addition of a Grepher, like one Grepher alone, allows you to OTK significantly more than pure Black Wings. And you have a very, very similar amount of mid to late game top decks. You are cutting one Blizzard, and post side you, um, I won't say frequently, but sometimes do side down to just one Blizzard. So I would say Pure Black Wings does have a little additional ceiling with Blizzard, because it's a very, very good late to mid game top deck in most situations. In addition, because you're cutting a Bora and a Blizzard, your Black Whirlwind access does become slightly worse. So there is a trade-off, but I'd say if you look at it in totality, um, hybrid Black Wings has a significantly higher ceiling, with the intellectual honesty that your Black Whirlwind is going to be a little bit worse, and you are slimming down on a Blizzard, which is a fantastic card. So you're cutting that. Next up, floor. I don't think this should be any surprise to anybody. Black Wings, pure Black Wings, I think has a significantly lower floor, which means that in your baseline game or when things aren't going your way, I think your loss rate um, is significantly higher in pure Black Wings than hybrid Black Wings. A lot of people say floor wrong, so they say, oh, it has a really low floor, which means it's consistent even when it's bad. That's not correct. What a floor means is, if even when it's bad, how bad can it get? So having a higher floor is a good thing. Having a higher ceiling is also a good thing. Um, I think hybrid Black Wings and pure Black Wings have, uh, I guess we'll start at the top, which is individual card quality versus conditional card quality. So I think a very good example of this is when you compare and contrast pure Black Wings versus Vayu Turbo. Vayu Turbo, I think, has like miles and miles better individual card quality, just for the sole reason that you get to run Rhoda, you get to run Arma, which are all, and you get to run Raiko, which are like all very independently good cards when you see them alone. Like Raiko's just, it's an insanely, insanely good individual card that doesn't necessarily need a bunch of other things to support it. When you contrast that something like a Bora, yeah, it synergizes with your engine a lot, but Bora itself individually is not a good card. It's actually quite shit. So that's what I mean when I say individual card quality. Next up is conditional card quality. So that's something like Grepher, which um, alone is kind of just a 1700 beater, but Grepher plus a pitch, or if you need to special summon it, or if you need to pitch something to set up a dad, when those conditions are met, it's an extremely high card quality card. So that's what I mean when I say individual card quality versus conditional card quality. I think like the shining example of something that's like an insanely high individual card quality is Raikou. Like it just kind of does everything. It's like removal, it's a starter, like it sets up your grave, it like it's just an insane card. Um, Whereas conditional card quality are cards that need something else to make them more effective. And I'd say Hybrid Blackwing has slightly higher individual card quality just due to the warrior package, but it also has higher conditional card quality because you basically have cards that once those conditions are met become even better. So Dark Armed, Grepher, Burial, you get the point. In addition, because you run less redundancies, you're going to have marginally, fewer hands of a bunch of values and a bunch of blizzards. So your card variety is important. I mean, this even comes like down to the trap lineup. Like, I mean, sometimes you just have too many Icarus, and I feel like two Icarus, you know, plus a wider variety of stuff like TT, Solemn, Oppression, Deck Dev, typically just makes your floor a lot lower because oftentimes two Icarus plus some Blackwings might not be that good of a hand. One Icarus plus some other type of trap that might be better removal in some other type of spot will be a better hand. Um, Next is floor. So again, a misunderstood card. Burial is both a consistency card and a ceiling card. So I think it's just something you can't go without. It's just too good. Yes, you can brick on it. It does happen, but if you're bricking on a burial and you can't get your deck in motion, you are probably going to lose that game anyway. Last is floor. I think no questions asked. Hybrid plays significantly better into bottomless, which is kind of the quintessential turn skip for pure Blackwings. You can send stuff back to grave with burial. You have ignition and trigger effects. You can play from grave. Um, you have Armo, which gets under bottomless. It's searchable. Like bottomless is definitely um, troublesome for Blackwings, and this deck just plays into it significantly better. Um, I also think pure Blackwings is, I won't say significantly, these are extremely marginal, but I do think it's better into, or pure Blackwings is worse into road. It's worse into heavy storm just because I don't think you need to commit as many back row in hybrid as you do with pure. And then it's marginally better into trap stun. Again, these are like very minor like things, um, but undoubtedly hybrid plays into those cards better. I also think you get, even if it's very marginal, you get non-gamed less with hybrid um, than you do with pure. So I think if you've played enough of both decks, you'll realize you can get non-gamed pretty easily if you get turn skipped once or twice and you're behind on initiative, or you lose RPS, which you're gonna do 50% of the time, or 100% if you're me. Um, Card variety and redundancies. This is something that's come up. Um, You have significantly more pairs of cards in hybrid Blackwings, which means you have less redundancies on average, and you have significantly more one-ofs. With pure Blackwings, just based on the nature of the engine, you have a high amount of three-ofs, which don't necessarily have self-synergy, so I think like the three shining examples of this are Blizzard, Boar, and Icarus. A hand of multiple Blizzards, often not that good. A hand of multiple Boras, often not that good. A hand of multiple Icarus can either be really good or really bad. At times, I guess it really kind of depends, just because Icarus is a very, very important part um, of your deck. Um, but I'd say, on average, seeing multiples of these cards is worse than seeing maybe one of them plus another card that you subbed out. And just mathematically, if you run pairs and one-ofs, you are going to see multiples of certain cards less often, which is a good thing for most cards. And post side. Now, I think, if you're familiar with Edison format, the big reason that, at least in my opinion, that Blackwings and Vayu are the best decks is they get better post side. I think almost everything else in the format generally does get worse post side on average. Now don't go typing in the comments, saying, "Oh, Black Wings gets worse post side versus, like Lightsworn." Like I get that, but like on average, I'd say Black Wings and Vayu um, almost always get better post side. Probably even more so Vayu. I think Vayu post side is its win rate just, I won't say it skyrockets, but it goes up more than almost anything else in the format that I can think of. Um, Now, hybrid versus pure. Hybrid gets even better post side than pure Black Wings for a few reasons. First, well, actually, let's talk about a trade-off. So I do think hybrid Black Wings is weaker to deck dev. So there is one concession. You're running, depending on how you build your deck, a handful more of deck dev targets. You can maybe side around that a little bit. Um, so it is a little bit weaker to deck dev. But both Black Wings and hybrid are both weak to deck dev in their own regards in certain situations. Um, the good news is that hybrid Black Wings is better at enabling deck dev. It's better at enabling oppression, so you can play under your oppression better. Um, Post side, your opponents are more likely to make siding errors, so sometimes they only see one half of your engine, so they'll only see the Blackwing part, or they'll only see the Vayu part. There are countless games that I've won, in 1 to 3 turns where they just see Greffers and they just see Vayu setups, and I just beat them down, and they have no idea that I'm on Blackwings. So maybe I don't have to face down as many Dust Tornadoes. So that's definitely um, a very nice thing to have. Your opponent's a little bit more prone to make siding errors, and there are fewer silver bullets um, versus hybrid than there are pure. One trade-off is you do have less monster lineup flexibility. I'd argue pure Blackwings. Honestly, it feels like sometimes you don't run enough monsters, just because they limited Gale. Um, but that is a trade-off with hybrid. You typically can't flex in many cards at all out of your monster lineup. It's a very rigid engine, um, but you do get to create more non-games post-side with hybrid, and that's because you're enabling deck dev more consistently, and you're able to also play under your own oppression more consistently. Pure Black Wings, deck dev, which is a format-defining card, can feel a bit unreliable. And Pure Blackwing also has somewhat limited turn 0 deck dev setups. So, I think people probably rip off deck dev or fire off deck dev turn 0 kind of like more often than they should. But it is nice to have that option. Um, I think Vayu Turbo is the poster child of, Greffer pitch Sirocco, send Vayu, and, pop off a deck dev like immediately. Like hybrid allows you to do that significantly more. Really, there are only a few ways you can do that with pure Black Wings, most of which are at a minus. So like something like a summon Shura, special Gale, make an Armor Master, and then pop off a deck dev if you really have to. That just doesn't feel good typically. Um, and I would say that pure Black Wings is very marginally weaker to Consecrated Light, depending on how you build your side. So that's kind of why I've felt like DD Warrior Lady is really nice. And I don't know like if there are other cards that might do a better job than that, but just having the ability to have like basically 2-for-1 um, consecrated light outs is just a little bit better. Um, so that's really the presentation here. Um, Let me know what you think. I think like in summary, if we just go through these slides, I'd say opening hand quality I think is undoubtedly better for hybrid. I think hybrid's also more consistent. I think it has more synergies. You get to run engine and engine supplement. I think you do have less deck building flexibility with hybrid, so I would say pure Black Wings is better in that regard. Hybrid has higher ceiling, undoubtedly. Hybrid Blackwing, in my opinion, this might be a little bit up for debate, I think also has a higher floor, so your bad games aren't as bad. I think, well, I don't think, I know for a fact that hybrid has higher card variety and fewer redundancies. And then the last slide here was post side. Undoubtedly, in most matchups, hybrid Blackwings is better than pure Blackwings. I'd say there are certain matchups, maybe like certain plant-based decks, which pure Blackwings fares better into. But I'd say if you like across the meta, hybrid is better post side than pure. That is everything. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm out.